So, weil meine Aufgabe ist ja immer nur so ein bisschen den moderatorischen Kit zwischen den einzelnen Punkten zu machen und ganz im Besonderen immer auf die Zeit zu achten. Das sagt mir Valentin jedes Mal: „Die Zeit, die Zeit, heute haben wir noch weniger Zeit.“ Also, 12:30 ich bin auf aufm Punkt fertig und ich freue mich sehr, dass Chiara Badiali hier ist. Bist du schon da, Chiara?
Yes, hi, I'm
Yes,
here.
hey, you're there. Very lovely. Darf ich dich auf Deutsch vorstellen?
Mhm. Yes, of
I'm
course.
gonna introduce you in German, but then you can switch to English, but I think it should be okay. Das ist Chiara Badiali von Julie's Bicycle und ich sage es jedes Mal wieder. Ich glaube, es gäbe keine Green Music Initiative, wenn es kein Julie's Bicycle in England gegeben hätte. Und wir haben eine ganz wirklich sehr kollegiale Form von Zusammenarbeit. Und, ich sage es ganz ungeschützt, ganz oft schaue ich nach England und denke: „Ach Mann, ihr seid so weit. Ich würde auch gerne das machen.“ Und auch das Aktionsnetzwerk Nachhaltigkeit in seiner engen Zusammenarbeit mit dem BKM ist natürlich modelliert nach eurer Zusammenarbeit mit dem Arts Council. Das muss ich sagen. Also, insofern, alles, was ich hier mache, basiert auf ganz viel tollen Dingen, die Chiara gemacht hat, die Alison Tickell in England gemacht hat. Und wir sind jetzt ganz erpicht darauf, dass trotz dieser idiotischen Brexit-Sache wir weiterhin zusammenarbeiten und ich freue mich da immer drauf. Und jetzt würde ich sagen, Stage is yours, Chiara. Hello.
Thank you. Thanks for that intro. And thanks for having me along as always. And thanks for everyone tuning in. Sorry, I am speaking in English. My German is way too rusty to do anything like this in German ever again. So I work at Julie's Bicycle. We were founded 15 years ago, originally by the UK music industry, now powering climate action across the broader creative and cultural community. I won't dwell too much on what we do. If you attended the forum last year, you would have heard my colleague Lucy speak in a bit more detail about our work with Arts Council England, which did make environmental reporting and putting in place an environmental policy and action plan a requirement for organisations receiving funding all the way back in 2012. And we've had the immense privilege of being able to deliver that programme alongside the Arts Council. But rather than revisit that story in detail today, I actually wanted to speak about some of the other projects we've been working on and end on a little forward-looking note. So our work really focuses on changing the cultural ecosystem, actually much like the title of this conference, Betriebsökologie. I think we really recognise that to change the way that the cultural ecosystem works, you have to focus on the component parts of it. So looking at data and knowledge, looking at people in action, and also looking at policy, which does so much to direct funding, to direct frameworks, and to direct priorities. And so one of the projects that we work on that really focuses on people is this idea of creative climate leadership, a program to empower artists and cultural professionals to take action on the climate and ecological crisis with impact, creativity, and resilience. The design of this program and how it came about was about giving people more than just the knowledge of how to manage their organizations and projects more sustainably. The how-to of things like energy efficiency, carbon accounting, understanding data, waste management, sustainable mobility plans is really important, but it can sometimes miss out the why and also what it really takes for someone to inhabit that role of being a change maker in their community. So CCL really is an intensive development program that was designed to start there. So we take on a limited group of around 24 participants for each of the programs by application. And there's a real commitment to interdisciplinarity. So this isn't just for people working in a specific art form like theatre or museums. We want to mix it up because while some challenges are really specific to one sector, many aren't, and there's a huge opportunity to learn from each other and feel connected actually to the wider cultural ecosystem in your country. The other thing that we have is a commitment to having a spread of roles. So from the policymakers and funders to freelancers, institutional representatives and artists at all career stages. We really want to interrogate what it means to be a leader and how we conceive of that term very often in more hierarchical systems. And also we think it's really important to have all of those roles represented because it gives everyone a systemic view of that cultural ecosystem. And change is going to happen faster if we start recognizing how power flows, who has the power to change what, and sometimes have to take quite an honest look at ourselves as well. as to how we might be a barrier to change that's being driven by others in our roles. And so there are now around 150 alumni across the world from the program, which we're really proud of. They're all doing amazing things. And we always deliver the program in partnership. So we bring an overall framework, but it has to be adapted to the local context. So at the moment, we're doing a version in Sweden and Scandinavia, supported by the Swedish Postcode Foundation and with a sustainability scientist and artist based at Lund University. We've done a version in the US with the University of Arizona and EcoArts Connections there. And two that were co-funded by Creative Europe with a network of European partners, and in particularly working really closely with PINA based in Slovenia on the course design and content. External funding tends to be a must for the CCL programs because to meet that objective of having that cross-section of arts and culture, a lot of the places have to be funded or co-funded to really enable that access. Some of the things that we've learned, I think, delivering CCL is, one is the importance of community. So this isn't just about content or giving people tools. I think making change can be a really lonely and exposed place, and there is a tendency for change makers to burn out and feel isolated. So part of the role of CCL is creating that mutual support network where people can call on each other and feel not as alone in the change-making work that they do. Another one is that importance of ownership and also permission by giving creative climate leadership a name. For some people, it's actually creating a space in which they can own that creative climate work. For example, one curator we worked with said, you know, before this, I would have never said that climate change was a curatorial specialism of mine. I would have been almost embarrassed to say it. And now I feel empowered to sort of front with it and lead with it. And of course, change happens in a lot of different guises and unexpected places. I think as JB, we know that we absolutely cannot take sole credit for all the amazing things that our creative climate leaders go off and do. They're very much their own people. But what we can do through CCL is create that platform, is create that space that gives them that power of community and resilience to keep going and push on. So I wanted to share just a couple of stories to show that the variety and the huge creativity from that group. So Anna-Kaisa Koski in Finland, for example, has set up Punos, which is an interdisciplinary lab on social and climate justice, including commissions for Indigenous artists to work on climate transformations. Some of the participants in our CCL in Wales who worked in UK theatre set up something called the Artist Climate Lab. And each theatre in a network sponsored a place for a theatre artist, from playwrights to choreographers to set designers, to explore climate change across 3 or 4 days. Each of those artists was sponsored by a theatre, but there wasn't an immediate expectation to produce a piece of art. It was much more about creating that space for them to start coming close to and engaging with the climate crisis. Karishma Rafferty is a curator at Somerset House. She's now moved on to Kew Gardens. But one of the things she did is she created Earth Day Season at Somerset House, a huge public art program with artists like Justin Bryce-Gorelia getting commissioned, again, to create and take over all the public spaces in Somerset House, which is a venue in central London, on climate change for a week. And she also set up something called the Sustain Group, bringing together the 2,500 Somerset House residents, which has offices for lots of arts and cultural organizations, including JB actually, on sustainability. And she started getting involved as well with city planning frameworks, like a consultation on the pedestrianization of the street outside the Somerset House. These two artists who participated in the program in the US created an artwork called the Artist's Grief Deck, a tool for communities to work through grief, originally from the pandemic, but also things like climate grief that can be used by different groups. Jessica Sim was one of our participants. She set up Nadas, a cultural house in Istanbul, in Turkey, that looks at things like sustainability in communities, art programs, bringing people together around exploring sustainability and food and cooking also for their neighborhood. Vicky Chapman and Lucy August Perna both work at Live Nation, one in the US, one in the UK. What they're doing at the moment is actually leading the Green Nation sustainability program for Live Nation, and looking at how Live Nation as a company, global company, is going to meet its targets to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, and and take action on climate. Gaia in Slovenia, she's a designer. She works a lot with invasive species, things like Japanese knotweed, and trying to find productive uses for these plants that we spend a lot of money and effort eradicating, whether that's food or, in her case, actually turning it into paper. And she's working with the city of Ljubljana on a circular economy project, creating that circular process for making paper from invasive species in the city. And then there's Mikey Soro in Ireland. He's a festival professional, and because he identified there was a real lack of sustainable solutions for the festival industry in Ireland, he set up Native Events. He built his own mobile solar power installations. They created a workshop taking exhibition materials from galleries to turn into set design also for festivals and outdoor events. And he has now created, through Native Events, with JB, Judy's Bicycle Europe, so that we can stay more connected to all of you post-Brexit. And they are really working very closely with the Arts Council in Ireland now to shift policy in Ireland around climate and culture. Just before I finish, I also wanted to talk a little bit about the policy bucket and a big project we did together with the British Council last year as part of the British Council's Climate Connection programme. Looking at cultural policy around the world. As part of that, we did roundtables in Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, and Colombia, really looking at how cultural policy was mediating climate action on the ground, and also how networks between grassroots, artists, organizations, and the cultural policymakers could be strengthened to create more opportunities for change and sort of recognize all the work that was already happening on the ground. And we also did a big sweep of national cultural policies, looking at how climate was, or in many cases was not yet being pulled across into those policies. So some of those key findings really are that even though most governments in the world are now signed up to the Paris Agreement, committing to climate action, for the most part, for whatever reason, arts councils and cultural policy bodies don't yet necessarily feel that they have a mandate to tackle climate change as part of their work. And that really, really has to shift. And the other thing we looked at is how it was possible actually to read across a lot of the priorities that arts and cultural policymakers have around professional development, around supporting cultural infrastructure, around supporting cultural rights. All of those can be seen and read through a climate lens. And actually, it's just about a small shift in perception and bringing climate into the heart of these discussions. And again, recognizing that mandate that we all have so that we can unlock future work. So anyone who's interested in that sort of big picture policy work, you can find that on the Judy's Bicycle website under our work and policy, including reports and all the specific roundtables. And just to finish, we're really pleased to announce this week that Judy's Bicycle has just secured a big round of funding from Arts Council England into the Creative Green Tools carbon calculators to really build out the platform, make it more user-friendly, develop hopefully an open source element to it so that we can keep working much more closely with partners across Europe and around the world, so that we're not duplicating investment and actually giving everyone the opportunity to do as much as they can on the platform that we already have. And one of the projects that we're working with through that as well is adapting the Creative Green Tools carbon calculator at the moment with Impala, the European label network, which Horst might talk a little bit about just later on. But yeah, we're really pleased to be able to do this. And that's it from me. Thank you so much to everyone listening. I think it's so important, especially in these days, to foster these networks of international and mutual solidarity around creative climate action.